Take 30 seconds and run this on yourself. Say these sentences out loud in the first person about you. I am patient. I am kind. I do not envy. I do not boast. I am not proud. I am not rude. I do not insist on my own way. I am not easily angered. I keep no record of wrongs. I bear all things. I believe all things. I hope all things. I endure all things. I never fail. How far did you get? For most of us, the whole thing falls apart somewhere around, I am not easily angered. And it collapses completely at, I keep no record of wrongs, because we know exactly which ledger we're still keeping and exactly whose name is written in it. Those sentences come straight out of a first-century letter, and this is what almost nobody realizes about them. They were never written as a poem to admire. They were written as a description, a careful line-by-line likeness of one particular kind of love. And the moment you hold it up against your own life, it stops being beautiful and starts being uncomfortable. That's what we're studying this week. A portrait of love so exact and so demanding that it stops every one of us in our tracks. And then, if we let it, turns us around and shows us the only person who ever fit the description. And that word, portrait, is worth holding on to, because it changes how you read the whole chapter. A portrait is a likeness. When a painter sits down to capture a face, every brushstroke is describing a real person who actually looks that way. And that's what Paul is doing here. More than handing us a set of commands to grit our teeth and obey, he's painting a face. Stroke by stroke, patient here, kind there, keeping no record of wrongs in the next line. And by the end, a real face has emerged from the canvas. The question the whole chapter quietly asks is, whose face is this? We'll come back to that because the answer is the most important thing in it. There's one more thing that changes everything about how these words land. Paul wrote them into the middle of a church fight, aimed at people who were behaving in almost the exact opposite way. And he opened with a claim so extreme it should stop us cold. You can have every gift, every talent, every impressive spiritual ability there is, and without this love, you are nothing. Let's walk into it, one day at a time. First, where this chapter sits, because the location is the whole key. Last week we watched the Corinthian church turn its spiritual gifts into a competition. They were showing off, ranking each other, arguing over who had the most impressive ability, and their worship had become a noisy contest instead of a gathering. Paul spent a whole chapter telling them they were one body, many parts, all needed. And then, right in the middle of that argument about gifts, before he goes on to give them practical rules for their worship services, he stops and does something unexpected. He writes a poem about love. It's not a detour. It's the hinge the whole thing turns on. Chapter 12 is about the gifts. Chapter 14 is about using them in an orderly way. And wedged deliberately in between, Chapter 13 tells them the one thing that was missing from all of it. Love. Paul is saying, in effect, you can sort out all your questions about gifts and worship, but if you don't have this, none of it matters. Love is the thing that has to run through everything else, or everything else is worthless. And the placement is deliberate in a way that's easy to miss. Paul could have written this chapter as a standalone essay, a beautiful meditation on love hanging on its own. Instead, he buried it in the middle of the most practical, argumentative, problem-solving part of the whole letter, surrounded on both sides by the mess of a divided church trying to figure out how to worship. That tells you what love actually is in Paul's mind. It's not a lovely abstraction to admire from a distance. It's the working heart of ordinary church life, the thing that either flows through the gifts and the meetings and the conflicts, or doesn't. He put the love chapter in the middle of the church fight on purpose, because that's exactly where love is supposed to live. In the trenches, among difficult people, doing the hard daily work of holding a community together.
Now, to feel the weight of the word he uses, you have to know something about the language he was writing in. The ancient Greeks had several different words where we only have one. They had a word for romantic and physical desire, the passion between lovers. They had a word for the natural affection inside a family, the love that binds a parent to a child, the instinctive bond of blood. They had a word for the warm loyalty of deep friendship, the affection between companions who have chosen each other. 3 good words, each for a real and beautiful kind of love, and each of them, notice, is a response to something. You desire what attracts you. You cherish your own family. You bond with the friend you like. Each of those loves is drawn out of you by something lovable in the other person. And Paul reaches past all three. He picks a fourth word, one that was rare and pale and barely used, a word without much color of its own. That word is agape. And the early Christians grabbed that faded, underused word precisely because it was a blank they could fill with something new. Because the love they had discovered in Jesus wasn't drawn out by anything attractive in them at all. It wasn't romantic desire, wasn't family instinct, wasn't the affection between friends who enjoy each other. It was something the world had no real word for. A love that gives without needing anything back. A love aimed at people who haven't earned it and can't repay it. A love that isn't a response to how lovable you are, but a decision that flows from the character of the one doing the loving. That is the shocking thing about agape. The other three loves are pulled out of you by the worth of the other person. This one is poured out regardless of worth. It loves the unlovely. It loves the enemy. It loves when there's nothing in it for the lover at all. They needed a word for that, so they took the empty one and poured the love of God into it. And here's what makes this even more striking. In the pagan world these Corinthians came from, the gods were not thought to love people. The gods were dangerous, moody, easily offended powers you had to appease and keep happy so they wouldn't hurt you. You brought sacrifices to the gods the way you'd pay protection money, to keep them off your back. The idea that the highest God actually loves human beings, personally, tenderly, self-sacrificially, was not the common belief of that world. It was news. It was a novelty. It was almost unthinkable. So when Paul writes a whole chapter defining this strange, self-giving agape, he isn't repeating something everyone already knew. He's describing something the world had barely dreamed of, a love that turned out to have a face and a name. Hold that in mind, this radical, world-changing love the Corinthians had received but weren't living. The whole chapter is Paul patiently drawing its portrait, one line at a time, so they can see what they were meant to look like.